All right, if you're leading a team right now, I'm pretty sure this is going to sound familiar. You've got constant reprioritization, right? New AI tools are creating all this ambiguity, and honestly, everyone just seems tired. It really feels like you're trying to steer a ship in a storm. Well, today we're going to dive into why that is, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. So let's get right into it.
Okay, first up, a pretty sobering number. Get this. Research consistently shows that over 70% of major change initiatives fail to meet their goals. 70%. I mean, just think about that for a second. That is a massive amount of wasted effort, money, and morale. So, the huge question is, why? Why does this keep happening?
So you might be thinking, well, it must be a bad strategy, right? Or a flawed framework. And you know what? That's rarely the case. The real reason things go off the rails is because we forget this one fundamental truth. People experience change emotionally long before they ever start to understand it logically. And this right here illustrates the core problem perfectly. You've got this massive disconnect. On one side, you have what we could call system speed. You know, the project plans, the new AI tools, the shifting priorities, all that stuff is moving at the speed of light. But then, on the other side, you've got emotional speed. And that's the much slower human pace it takes for us to adapt to uncertainty, a loss of control, and hey, maybe even that quiet fear of becoming irrelevant. And when leaders just completely ignore this gap, well, resistance isn't just possible, it's pretty much guaranteed.
Okay, so let's completely reframe how we think about this. What if resistance wasn't the enemy? What if it wasn't a problem to be solved, but actually a signal to be understood? What if it was just data? This is the central idea we're going to unpack together.
Let's make this real with an actual story. So there's this delivery team, and they are pushing back hard against adopting a new Kanban board. And what was the immediate assumption from leadership? You guessed it. Classic mindset problem. They just don't want to change.
But was it really a mindset problem? Come on. Or was that resistance just the tip of the iceberg? A symptom of something much deeper? Something you'd never see on a project plan?
And here's what they found when they actually paused and listened. It turns out the resistance had nothing to do with the board itself. No, it was about a deep-seated fear of being micromanaged. It was about the memory of how metrics had been used against them in the past. And honestly, it was about a fundamental lack of trust because of all the other failed transformations they'd been through. That Kanban board, it wasn't the problem. It was just the trigger for all these much bigger fears. And here is the absolute game changer in that story. The second the leaders switched from being forceful to being curious, everything changed. They acknowledged the fears, they reframed the tool as something the team could actually own for their own visibility, and just like that, the resistance melted away. It proves that curiosity, not command, is what actually creates momentum.
All right, so how do we take that insight and apply it more broadly? Well, that story is actually a perfect illustration of a really simple but powerful framework for navigating the human side of any change. It's called the 3 Rs. So think of it as a journey through 3 stages. It starts with resistance, which, as we now know, is really just a signal of fear or confusion, not defiance. Now, a leader's job is to listen to that signal to help build the second R, resilience. This is all about creating safety and clarity so people can stay in the game. And from that place of resilience, you can finally get to renewal. That's where teams reconnect with their purpose, they get their energy back, and they're willing to experiment again. See, the goal isn't to skip resistance. It's to listen to it so you can move through it.
Okay, so that's the what of the framework. But now let's get to the how. How do you actually lead a team through those 3 Rs? You know, from that initial resistance all the way to renewal? Well, that's exactly where this new leadership toolkit comes into play.
You know, the old playbook for change was what you might call louder leadership. Just turn up the volume, right? More pressure, more commands, just force it through. But the new playbook, it requires something totally different, steadier leadership. This is all about creating psychological safety, using storytelling to actually connect with people, and providing relentless clarity. It's a huge shift from leading by force to leading with trust.
And this steadier leadership is really built on 4 skills that are just non-negotiable. Number 1, psychological safety. Because let's be honest, innovation dies when people feel like they're under surveillance. Number 2 is storytelling, and I mean especially sharing your own failures. It's the best way to normalize uncertainty. Number 3, emotional regulation. Your team is a mirror. They will absolutely reflect your anxiety or your calm. And finally, number 4, clarity over certainty. Look, you don't need all the answers. Just saying, here's what we know now and here's what we don't, is one of the most powerful ways to build trust when things feel chaotic.
Now, this doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing. You can start with really simple, practical micro-practices. For example, instead of asking why people aren't on board, just ask, what worries you most right now? Or try this one. Replace that frustrating question, why aren't we aligned, with a much more curious one. What feels unclear to you? Trust me, these tiny shifts in language can have an absolutely massive impact.
Now, I know some of this might feel a little soft, but the truth is, this whole idea of leading slower and listening deeper, it has a hard, data-backed impact on performance. So let's actually look at the numbers.
Okay, first number, 35%. So what's that? Well, according to McKinsey, teams with high psychological safety, where people actually feel safe to speak up and take risks, those teams adapt to change 35% faster. It's incredible, right? It proves that pausing to listen actually accelerates your progress. It turns out slower really is faster.
Next number for you, 2 times. Leaders who are willing to admit